Number 10. Belle Gibson. The wellness fraud who built an empire on lies. Belle Gibson emerged from relative obscurity in 2013 to become one of Australia's most celebrated wellness influencers, building a massive following by sharing her supposedly miraculous story of curing terminal brain cancer through natural therapies, clean eating, and alternative medicine. The young woman with long flowing hair and an ethereal presence captivated hundreds of thousands of followers on Instagram and other social media platforms, presenting herself as living proof that conventional medicine wasn't the only path to healing. Gibson claimed she had been diagnosed with terminal brain cancer at age 20 and given just months to live by doctors. But through her dedicated regimen of whole foods, juicing, oxygen therapy, and rejection of chemotherapy, she had not only survived but thrived. Her app, The Whole Pantry, which featured recipes, wellness tips, and her personal journey, became a sensation in the health and wellness space, reaching number 1 in the Apple App Store's food and drink category and generating substantial revenue. The app's success led to a book deal with Penguin Books, and Gibson's influence extended far beyond social media as she became a sought-after speaker and consultant in the wellness industry. She claimed portions of the app's profits would go to various charities supporting cancer research, families affected by illness, and other worthy causes, further cementing her image as a selfless advocate who had transformed personal tragedy into a mission to help others. Media outlets featured her story extensively, with Gibson appearing in magazines, newspapers, and television programs across Australia and internationally, always maintaining her serene composure and unwavering commitment to her narrative. However, beneath the carefully curated Instagram posts, inspirational quotes, and green smoothie photos lay an elaborate deception that would eventually unravel spectacularly. In early 2015, journalists began investigating Gibson's claims after inconsistencies emerged in her story and questions arose about the charitable donations she had promised. The Australian media, particularly Fairfax journalists, discovered that none of the substantial funds Gibson claimed to have donated to charities had actually been received by those organizations, with several charities confirming they had never received a single dollar despite Gibson's public assertions about her philanthropic efforts. More damning still, investigators found no evidence that Gibson had ever been diagnosed with cancer at all, terminal or otherwise, with medical records failing to support any of her health claims. When confronted by journalists, Gibson's story began to change repeatedly, first claiming she had been misdiagnosed, then suggesting she had been confused about her medical history, and finally admitting in a 2015 interview that none of it had been true. She confessed she had never had cancer, had never undergone the treatments she described, and had fabricated the entire narrative that formed the foundation of her career and business empire. The revelation sent shockwaves through the wellness community and beyond, as thousands of vulnerable people who had followed Gibson's advice, purchased her products, and donated money to what they believed were charitable causes realized they had been deceived. Consumer Affairs Victoria launched an investigation into Gibson's business practices, examining whether her company had engaged in unconscionable conduct and violated Australian consumer law by making false representations about charitable donations and her personal health history. The investigation revealed that the Whole Pantry had generated approximately $320,000 Australian dollars in revenue, with Gibson claiming at various times that 5%, 10%, or even larger portions would be donated to charity, yet records showed minimal charitable giving occurred. In March 2017, the Federal Court of Australia found Belle Gibson guilty of 5 breaches of Australian consumer law, determining she had engaged in misleading and deceptive conduct by falsely claiming she had donated money to charity and by making false claims about her health conditions. Justice Debbie Mortimer's judgment was scathing, noting that Gibson had shown no remorse, failed to cooperate with the investigation, and continued to maintain various aspects of her deception even after being exposed. The court fined Gibson $410,000 Australian dollars, though she failed to pay the penalty, claiming she had no assets or income despite evidence suggesting otherwise. Her refusal to pay the fine led to further legal proceedings, with Consumer Affairs Victoria pursuing enforcement action to recover the money owed. Gibson's fall from grace was complete as her social media accounts went silent. Her book was pulled from shelves, and her app was removed from app stores, though she never faced criminal charges for fraud, as Australian law at the time made prosecution difficult in cases involving claimed personal illness rather than direct financial fraud schemes. The case highlighted significant gaps in consumer protection and raised important questions about the accountability of influencers who make health claims and charitable promises to their followers. Perhaps most tragically, evidence emerged that some of Gibson's followers, inspired by her story, had rejected conventional cancer treatment in favor of alternative therapies, with at least one documented case of a woman who delayed chemotherapy based on Gibson's influence and subsequently died. Gibson occasionally resurfaces on social media under different names or in private groups, sometimes claiming to have converted to various religions or adopted new identities, but her credibility remains destroyed and her legacy serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked influence and the vulnerability of people seeking hope in the face of serious illness. The Belle Gibson scandal fundamentally changed how wellness influencers are scrutinized in Australia, leading to increased regulatory attention and public skepticism toward extraordinary health claims made on social media platforms. Number 9. Tay-K, the teenage rapper whose viral hit chronicled real crimes. Tamour McIntyre, known professionally as Tay-K, achieved explosive fame in 2017 with his breakout single The Race, a hard-hitting rap track that went viral precisely because it was recorded while the teenage artist was on the run from law enforcement facing murder charges. Born in June 2000 in Long Beach, California, before relocating to Arlington, Texas, Tay-K began pursuing music seriously as a young teenager, releasing early tracks that gained modest attention in local hip-hop circles. However, his life took a dark turn in July 2016 when, at just 16 years old, he allegedly participated in a home invasion robbery in Mansfield, Texas, that resulted in the death of 21-year-old Ethan Walker, who was shot multiple times during the botched robbery attempt. Tay-K was arrested and charged with capital murder along with several co-defendants, facing the possibility of life in prison despite his age. In March 2017, while under house arrest awaiting trial and wearing an ankle monitor, Tay-K made a decision that would define his brief career and seal his fate. He cut off his monitoring device and fled, becoming a fugitive from justice. During his 3 months on the run, moving between various locations and evading law enforcement, Tay-K recorded and released The Race, a brazen track in which he explicitly referenced his fugitive status with lyrics that seemed to celebrate his flight from justice and mock authorities. The song's music video, filmed in various locations as he moved around, featured Tay-K flashing money, making gang signs, and portraying the life of a young outlaw, with the backdrop of his actual wanted status lending an air of dangerous authenticity that resonated with certain audiences. The track went viral almost immediately, accumulating millions of streams on SoundCloud and YouTube, with listeners fascinated by the novelty of a teenage fugitive rapper creating music while actively evading capture for murder charges. Major hip-hop publications covered the phenomenon, debating the ethics of promoting music created under such circumstances while acknowledging the undeniable cultural moment it represented. As The Race climbed streaming charts and gained mainstream attention, law enforcement agencies intensified their manhunt for Tay-K, who would become not just a murder suspect but a viral internet personality. During his time as a fugitive, Tay-K was allegedly involved in additional violent crimes, including a robbery in April 2017 in Bexar County, Texas, where a 65-year-old photographer named Mark Saldiva was fatally shot, and another incident in which a 23-year-old man was shot and injured during a robbery at a Chick-fil-A parking lot. These alleged crimes committed while on the run would add significantly to the charges Tay-K eventually faced. In June 2017, after 3 months as a fugitive, U.S. Marshals located and arrested Tay-K in Elizabeth, New Jersey, ending his run from justice. By the time of his arrest, The Race had become a massive hit, eventually being certified platinum by the Recording Industry Association of America, peaking at number 44 on the Billboard Hot 100, and accumulating hundreds of millions of streams across platforms. The irony was not lost on observers that Tay-K's crime and flight had become the foundation of his commercial success, raising uncomfortable questions about the glorification of criminal behavior in certain music genres and the ethics of profiting from content created while evading justice for violent crimes. Tay-K's legal proceedings became a media spectacle, with his young age, the severity of the charges, and his viral fame creating intense public interest. In July 2019, after a lengthy trial, a jury found Tay-K guilty of murder in the death of Ethan Walker, as well as 3 counts of aggravated robbery. The prosecution presented evidence that Tay-K had been actively involved in planning and executing the home invasion, that he had been present when Walker was killed, and that he bore responsibility under Texas law for the death that occurred during the commission of the felony, even if he hadn't personally pulled the trigger. The defense argued that Tay-K had been a follower rather than a leader in the crime, that his youth should be considered a mitigating factor, and that he had not fired the fatal shots, but the jury rejected these arguments. In a separate trial in 2019, Tay-K was also convicted of aggravated robbery in connection with the attack on the elderly photographer Mark Saldiva, though murder charges in that case were not pursued against him specifically. The sentencing phase proved equally dramatic, with prosecutors seeking a harsh penalty to send a message about violent crime and flight from justice, while defense attorneys pleaded for leniency based on Tay-K's age and potential for rehabilitation. In July 2019, the judge sentenced Tay-K to 55 years in prison for the murder conviction, with an additional 30 years for 2 of the aggravated robbery charges, to be served concurrently. He also received 2 additional sentences of 13 years and 30 years for the other robbery convictions, with some portions to be served consecutively, meaning Tay-K would face decades in prison before becoming eligible for parole. The sentence meant that McIntyre, who was just 19 years old at sentencing, would likely serve a minimum of 27.5 years before parole eligibility, potentially remaining incarcerated into his late 40s. During his incarceration, the race has continued to generate streaming revenue, with complicated legal and ethical questions about who profits from the music and whether it's appropriate for the artist to benefit financially from content directly connected to his crimes. Tay-K's case became a flashpoint in broader cultural debates about hip-hop, authenticity, crime, and the music industry's relationship with artists who have criminal backgrounds or whose music explicitly celebrates illegal activity. Some artists and fans defended him as a product of his environment, arguing that systemic poverty and lack of opportunity drove young people toward crime, and that his music represented authentic expression of that reality. Others condemned the glorification of his crimes and the way his viral fame had seemingly rewarded violent behavior with commercial success and cultural cachet. Legal scholars and youth advocates have pointed to Tay-K's case as an example of how social media and viral culture can intersect with the criminal justice system in unprecedented ways, with a teenager's decision to document his fugitive status becoming both his claim to fame and evidence of his callousness toward the legal system. From prison, Tay-K has occasionally released music through intermediaries or released previously recorded material, though his ability to create new content is severely limited by his incarceration. His social media accounts, managed by others, continue to maintain his image and promote his music to fans who remain devoted to the artist despite, or perhaps because of, his criminal convictions. The families of his victims, particularly Ethan Walker's loved ones, have spoken publicly about their pain and frustration with the way Tay-K's fame has overshadowed their loss, with Walker's mother stating that her son's death should not be a footnote to a viral rap career. Tay-K's story represents a uniquely modern tragedy where technology, social media virality, youth violence, and entertainment industry ethics collided with devastating consequences for multiple victims and the young perpetrator himself, now spending the prime of his life behind bars for crimes committed as a teenager. Number 8. Anna Sorokin, the fake heiress who scammed New York's elite. Anna Sorokin, who operated under the alias Anna Delvey, orchestrated one of the most audacious social engineering schemes in recent memory, convincing New York City's wealthy elite that she was a German heiress with a €42 million trust fund while systematically defrauding hotels, banks, and individuals out of hundreds of thousands of dollars. Born in Russia in 1991, Sorokin moved to Germany with her family as a teenager, where her father worked as a truck driver and later operated a heating and cooling business, providing a solidly middle-class but far from wealthy upbringing. After attending fashion school in Paris and working briefly for a French fashion magazine, Sorokin moved to New York City in 2013, and it was there that she reinvented herself completely, adopting the name Anna Delvey and crafting an elaborate persona as the daughter of a wealthy German diplomat or oil tycoon, with stories about her background varying depending on her audience. With remarkable attention to detail, Sorokin cultivated the appearance of extreme wealth, wearing designer clothes, staying in luxury hotels, dining at exclusive restaurants, tipping generously, and moving confidently through Manhattan's social scene as if she belonged among the ultra-wealthy. Her charisma, combined with an accent that lent credibility to her European heiress story, allowed her to infiltrate circles that typically maintain rigid barriers to entry, befriending fashion designers, art collectors, hotel employees, and other well-connected individuals who vouched for her authenticity to others. Sorokin's grand ambition was to create the Anna Delvey Foundation, an exclusive private arts club and creative space housed in a landmark building, for which she sought millions in funding and actually came remarkably close to securing a substantial loan from a major financial institution. To support her lifestyle while pursuing this goal, Sorokin employed various tactics, including staying at expensive hotels for weeks or months, while providing fake wire transfer documentation or claiming her accounts were temporarily frozen, convincing friends to pay for trips with promises of reimbursement that never came, using bad checks that would take days to bounce, and exploiting the trust and professional courtesy extended to seemingly wealthy clients by luxury establishments. For months, this strategy worked remarkably well, with Sorokin living in expensive hotel suites, flying on private jets, taking international trips, and maintaining the appearance of immense wealth while actually having little to no legitimate funds. One of her most notorious schemes involved a trip to Morocco in 2017 with a friend, where Sorokin had invited a personal trainer friend to join her on what was promised to be an all-expenses-paid luxury vacation. But when it came time to pay the $12,000 bill for their stay at a luxury resort, Sorokin's credit cards were declined and her friend was forced to charge the entire amount on her own credit card, which Sorokin promised to repay but never did, leaving the woman with significant debt and damage to her own finances. Banks began to grow suspicious when Sorokin attempted to secure a $22 million loan to fund her arts foundation, with City National Bank conducting due diligence that revealed irregularities in her financial documentation, though she still managed to convince them to initially approve a substantial credit line by providing fabricated bank statements from Swiss and German institutions showing she had millions in assets. Her scheme began unraveling in 2017 when various hotels, individuals, and businesses she had defrauded started comparing notes and involving law enforcement, realizing that this supposed German heiress had left a trail of unpaid bills, bounced checks, and broken promises throughout Manhattan. In October 2017, after months of investigation, Sorokin was arrested by police as she left a luxury rehab facility in Malibu, California, where she had been staying and, predictably, not paying her bills. She was extradited to New York to face charges including grand larceny, theft of services, and several counts of attempted grand larceny for her efforts to secure fraudulent loans. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office charged that between 2016 and 2017, Sorokin had stolen approximately $275,000 through various schemes targeting hotels, banks, and individuals. Her trial in 2019 became a media sensation, with Sorokin appearing in court wearing designer outfits styled by a celebrity wardrobe consultant, maintaining her commitment to appearances even while facing serious criminal charges. The trial revealed the full extent of her deception, with prosecutors presenting evidence of forged documents, fake bank statements, and a pattern of deliberate fraud targeting victims across the hospitality and financial industries. Witnesses testified about Sorokin's elaborate lies, her confidence in demanding services while having no ability to pay, and the damage her schemes had caused to individuals who had trusted her. Her defense attorney argued that Sorokin's behavior reflected ambition and entrepreneurial hustle rather than criminal intent, suggesting she had genuinely believed she would eventually access family funds to repay everyone, and that she was simply operating on credit like many wealthy individuals do. A defense that struck many observers as absurd, given the extensive documentation of deliberate fraud. In April 2019, a jury found Anna Sorokin guilty on 8 counts including grand larceny, attempted grand larceny, and theft of services, while acquitting her on 2 counts including the most serious charge related to the attempted bank fraud. In May 2019, Judge Diane Kiesel sentenced Sorokin to 4 to 12 years in state prison, ordered her to pay restitution of nearly $200,000, and imposed a substantial fine, noting that Sorokin had shown no remorse and seemed to view her crimes as acceptable business practices. During her incarceration at Rikers Island and later at the Albion Correctional Facility in upstate New York, Sorokin's notoriety only grew as her story was featured in extensive media coverage, including a viral New York Magazine article that was adapted by Netflix into the hit series Inventing Anna, produced by Shonda Rhimes. The streaming series, released in 2022, brought Sorokin's story to a global audience and reignited debates about whether society was glorifying a fraudster and whether Sorokin should profit from her crimes through media deals. Netflix reportedly paid Sorokin $320,000 for the rights to her story, with $199,000 of that amount going directly to restitution payments, victim compensation, and legal fees, though the fact that she received any payment at all for her criminal exploits troubled many observers and victims. Sorokin was released from prison in February 2021 after serving approximately 4 years, but was immediately taken into custody by Immigration and Customs Enforcement because she had overstayed her visa, facing deportation back to Germany. Throughout her ICE detention, Sorokin fought deportation and attempted to remain in the United States, arguing she had business opportunities and could rebuild her life legally. In October 2022, after 18 months in immigration detention, Sorokin was released on house arrest while her immigration case continued, subject to strict conditions including wearing an ankle monitor, remaining confined to a specific Manhattan apartment, and not being allowed on social media personally, though her team continues to manage her public image. Since her release, Sorokin has attempted to reinvent herself again, this time as a legitimate influencer and media personality, giving interviews, launching a podcast, creating art that has sold for significant sums, and positioning herself as a misunderstood entrepreneur and social commentator. Her social media presence, managed by representatives, continues to attract hundreds of thousands of followers fascinated by her story and persona. Critics argue that Sorokin has faced no genuine consequences and has instead been rewarded with fame and financial opportunities derived directly from her crimes, while supporters suggest she has served her time and deserves a chance at redemption. Her victims, including the friend left with $12,000 in debt from the Morocco trip, have expressed frustration that Sorokin's celebrity has overshadowed the real harm she caused to people who trusted her. As of now, Sorokin remains in the United States under house arrest while her immigration status is determined, continuing to leverage her infamy into a personal brand built on the same confidence and audacity that enabled her frauds, raising profound questions about society's relationship with white-collar criminals who possess charisma and media savvy. Number 7. Lovely Peaches. The controversial creator arrested for disturbing threats. Brittany Johnson, known online as Lovely Peaches, built a following through increasingly disturbing and controversial content that pushed the boundaries of acceptable behavior on social media, ultimately leading to her arrest on serious criminal charges. Johnson emerged on social media platforms around 2017, initially posting eccentric content that included bizarre rants, unusual eating challenges, and unpredictable behavior that some viewers found entertaining in its randomness. However, her content quickly escalated into territory that concerned viewers and platform moderators, with Johnson posting videos that included apparent self-harm, unsanitary living conditions, consumption of non-food items, and graphic discussions of sexual topics, all delivered with a chaotic energy that was difficult to categorize as performance art, mental health crisis, or deliberate provocation. As her following grew to hundreds of thousands across Instagram, TikTok, and other platforms, Johnson's content became increasingly dark, focusing on shocking her audience rather than entertaining them, with frequent bans from platforms doing little to slow her presence as she created new accounts immediately after each removal. Johnson claimed to have a young daughter named Cora, and some of her most disturbing content involved the child, with Johnson making statements and videos that suggested neglect or abuse, posting content allegedly showing unsanitary conditions the child lived in, and making graphic threats against the child that appalled viewers. These posts triggered thousands of reports to Child Protective Services and law enforcement, with concerned viewers and child safety advocates desperately trying to intervene to protect the child from what appeared to be a dangerous situation. Johnson's behavior included live streaming concerning situations, posting videos where she appeared intoxicated or under the influence of substances while claiming to be caring for her daughter, and making increasingly graphic and disturbing statements about harming the child, though the veracity of many claims was unclear given her pattern of seeking attention through shock value. The situation reached a critical point when Johnson began targeting other social media personalities and celebrities with harassment, threats, and disturbing content, including an extended campaign of harassment against teenage singer and social media star Charli D'Amelio, in which Johnson made graphic threats of violence, posted disturbing sexual content referencing the underage celebrity, and encouraged her followers to harass D'Amelio and her family. These threats included explicit statements about harming D'Amelio, sexually explicit content referencing her, and recruitment of others to participate in the harassment, behavior that crossed clearly into criminal territory. The D'Amelio family reported the threats to law enforcement and child safety advocates, online safety organizations, and thousands of concerned social media users mobilized to document Johnson's behavior and pressure platforms and authorities to take action. Investigations revealed a complex picture in which Johnson's daughter Cora was actually in the custody of the child's father and had been removed from Johnson's care due to concerns about her ability to parent safely, meaning many of the most disturbing claims Johnson made about having access to harm the child were false, though this did not diminish the severity of her making such statements publicly. In January 2021, Johnson was arrested in Louisiana on charges related to the threats against Charli D'Amelio, facing charges that included cyberstalking of a minor and making terroristic threats. Law enforcement took the threats seriously given Johnson's pattern of escalating behavior and the graphic nature of her statements, which included specific threats of kidnapping, sexual assault, and murder directed at the teenage celebrity. The arrest brought temporary relief to D'Amelio's family and the broader social media community that had been horrified by Johnson's content, though questions remained about how someone exhibiting such disturbing behavior had been allowed to maintain a platform and following for so long. Johnson's case highlighted significant failures in social media content moderation, with platforms repeatedly banning her accounts but failing to prevent her from simply creating new ones and continuing the same behavior, suggesting that account-level enforcement was insufficient for addressing determined bad actors. Mental health professionals and social media safety experts pointed to Johnson's case as an example of how platforms struggle to handle users who may be experiencing mental health crises, while simultaneously engaging in behavior that threatens or harms others, with the entertainment-driven algorithms that govern content promotion sometimes amplifying disturbing content because it generates engagement through shock and concern. During legal proceedings, questions arose about Johnson's mental health and competency, with defense attorneys suggesting she required psychiatric evaluation and treatment rather than purely punitive measures, while prosecutors argued that regardless of mental health status, she had made specific credible threats against a minor that warranted serious consequences. In July 2021, Johnson pleaded guilty to charges related to the cyberstalking and threats, accepting a plea deal that required her to serve time in jail, undergo mental health treatment, and face restrictions on her social media use as conditions of probation. The exact terms of her sentence included periods of incarceration in local jail facilities, mandatory psychiatric evaluation and treatment, and a prohibition on contacting Charli D'Amelio or her family members directly or through intermediaries. The case also resulted in enhanced protective measures for the D'Amelio family and led to broader discussions about celebrity safety in the social media age. Following her incarceration and treatment, Johnson has periodically resurfaced on social media platforms under various accounts, sometimes appearing more stable and acknowledging that she had been in crisis during her most disturbing content periods, other times reverting to attention-seeking behavior that concerns followers and prompts new waves of account bans. Child Protective Services maintained custody arrangements that keep Johnson's daughter with her father, with court-ordered limitations on Johnson's contact with the child pending demonstration of sustained stability and appropriate behavior. The Lovely Peaches case remains frequently cited in discussions about social media platform responsibility, with critics arguing that Johnson's ability to terrorize others, make graphic threats against children including her own daughter, and maintain a following despite numerous violations demonstrates fundamental failures in content moderation systems that prioritize engagement over safety. Platform representatives have pointed to Johnson's case as part of broader improvements in threat detection and coordinated ban enforcement designed to prevent banned users from simply creating new accounts, though critics note that these measures remain insufficient. Mental health advocates have used Johnson's trajectory as an example of how social media can amplify mental health crises, with the attention and engagement generated by increasingly disturbing behavior potentially reinforcing and escalating the crisis rather than prompting intervention, creating a feedback loop where shock content generates followers which encourages more extreme content in a destructive cycle. The intersection of mental illness, social media platforms, child safety, and celebrity harassment in Johnson's case created a perfect storm that exposed vulnerabilities in multiple systems, from content moderation to mental health intervention to child protective services coordination. Johnson's current status involves periodic incarceration for probation violations, ongoing mental health treatment requirements, and continued restrictions on her social media presence, though she remains a cautionary tale about the dark potential of social media fame pursued through increasingly disturbing means. The victims of her harassment, particularly Charli D'Amelio, who was just 16 when targeted, have spoken about the lasting impact of being threatened so graphically and publicly, with D'Amelio's family advocating for stronger legal protections for minors on social media and better platform accountability for enabling harassment. Johnson herself has given interviews claiming she regrets her past behavior and attributing it to mental health struggles, substance abuse, and a desperate need for attention that spiraled into dangerous territory, though the sincerity of these statements remains debated given her pattern of manipulation and attention-seeking. The Lovely Peaches case stands as perhaps the most disturbing example of how social media influence can be pursued through increasingly dark and dangerous means, with the pursuit of views, followers, and notoriety overriding considerations of legality, morality, or the welfare of innocent victims, including children. Number 6. Fyre Festival's Billy McFarland. The tech bro who sold a fantasy festival, Billy McFarland, presented himself as a young tech entrepreneur and marketing genius, successfully promoting a luxury music festival that was supposed to represent the pinnacle of exclusive influencer culture, but instead delivered a chaotic disaster that defrauded thousands of attendees and vendors, while becoming a symbol of fraudulent excess in the influencer age. Born in 1991 in New York, McFarland showed entrepreneurial ambitions from an early age, launching his first company while still in college before dropping out to pursue business ventures full-time. His early ventures included Spling, an online advertising platform, and Magnuses, a membership card company aimed at millennials that promised exclusive access to events and services, though the company faced multiple complaints about failing to deliver promised benefits and was sued by merchants for unpaid bills, establishing a pattern of overpromising and underdelivering that would define McFarland's career. In 2016, McFarland conceived of the Fyre Festival, partnering with rapper Ja Rule to create what was marketed as an ultra-luxurious music festival on a private island in the Bahamas once owned by drug lord Pablo Escobar, featuring performances by major musical acts, accommodations in luxury villas, gourmet dining, and an exclusive experience marketed to wealthy millennials and influencers. To promote the festival, McFarland executed a brilliant marketing campaign that leveraged influencer culture perfectly, paying top social media influencers including Kendall Jenner, Bella Hadid, Emily Ratajkowski, and dozens of others to post coordinated orange tile images on Instagram with the hashtag Fyre Festival, creating massive buzz without revealing any actual details about the event. The campaign was masterfully executed, generating enormous interest and FOMO, fear of missing out, among the target demographic, with ticket packages ranging from $500 for basic admission to $12,000 for VIP packages, and even more expensive packages priced at tens of thousands of dollars that included luxury yacht accommodations and other premium experiences. Hundreds of people purchased tickets believing they were securing access to the exclusive event of the year, with some spending their life savings or taking on debt to afford the premium packages. However, behind the glossy marketing and celebrity endorsements, the reality of festival preparation was catastrophically different from what had been promised. The private island initially secured for the event became unavailable, forcing McFarland to relocate to a different Bahamian island with inadequate infrastructure. The luxury villas promised to attendees were actually disaster relief tents from FEMA, with most not yet set up when guests began arriving. The gourmet meals prepared by celebrity chefs were actually cheese sandwiches in styrofoam containers. The major musical acts had never actually been booked or paid. The infrastructure, including water, power, and sanitation, was woefully inadequate for the number of expected attendees. Despite clear evidence that the festival could not possibly deliver what had been promised, McFarland continued selling tickets and insisting to his increasingly panicked staff that everything would work out, displaying either delusional optimism or deliberate fraud as he refused to cancel the event and refund ticket holders even as disaster became inevitable. In late April 2017, hundreds of festival attendees arrived in the Bahamas expecting luxury accommodations and instead found themselves stranded in what was essentially a disaster zone, with insufficient shelter, food, water, or even basic safety measures. Social media, the same tool McFarland had used to promote the festival, became the medium through which the disaster was documented in real time, with attendees posting photos and videos of the chaotic scene, including the now infamous image of a sad cheese sandwich that became the symbol of the festival's failure. Attendees were left stranded without proper accommodations. Flights off the island were canceled or overbooked, and the situation deteriorated to the point that the Bahamian government had to intervene to help evacuate attendees safely. The fallout was immediate and severe, with thousands of attendees demanding refunds, local Bahamian workers and vendors reporting they had not been paid for their work and services, and numerous lawsuits being filed against McFarland, Ja Rule, and the festival organizers. Investigations revealed that McFarland had known for months that the festival could not deliver what had been promised but continued selling tickets and spending the money on personal expenses and attempting to market future events. Federal prosecutors charged McFarland with wire fraud in June 2017, alleging he had defrauded festival attendees and investors of more than $26 million through false representations about the festival and his business operations. Even while out on bail awaiting trial for the Fyre Festival fraud, McFarland continued engaging in fraudulent schemes, launching a company called NYC VIP Access that claimed to sell tickets to exclusive events like the Met Gala, Burning Man, and Coachella, but was actually selling fake tickets, defrauding additional victims of approximately $150,000 before he was caught. In March 2018, McFarland pleaded guilty to 2 counts of wire fraud related to both the Fyre Festival and the fake ticket scheme, admitting to prosecutors that he had knowingly made false statements to investors and customers and had diverted funds for personal use. In October 2018, Judge Naomi Rice Buchwald sentenced Billy McFarland to 6 years in federal prison and ordered him to pay $26 million in restitution to victims, noting that McFarland had shown a pattern of fraud and had continued committing crimes even while awaiting trial. The sentencing memorandum revealed the extensive scope of McFarland's fraud, including forged documents he had provided to investors, fake bank statements showing millions in assets that did not exist, and a pattern of spending investor and customer funds on luxury personal expenses, including expensive apartments, entertainment, and promotional events for himself, rather than on actually developing the businesses or events he had promised. 2 documentary films about the Fyre Festival, released on Netflix and Hulu in 2019, brought the disaster to an even wider audience and made the festival a cultural touchstone representing influencer culture, fraud, millennial excess, and the power of social media marketing to create perception divorced from reality. The documentaries revealed additional disturbing details about McFarland's behavior, including his willingness to ask an employee to perform sexual favors to get water released from customs, his treatment of Bahamian workers who were never paid for their labor, and his absolute refusal to accept responsibility or cancel the event even when disaster was obviously imminent. Ja Rule, who had been McFarland's partner in the venture, was not criminally charged and maintained he had also been deceived by McFarland about the state of festival preparations. Though he faced civil lawsuits from attendees and vendors and suffered significant reputational damage, the influencers who had been paid to promote the festival also faced backlash, with critics arguing they had irresponsibly promoted an event without doing due diligence about whether it could deliver what was promised, leading to increased scrutiny of influencer marketing practices and eventually contributing to new Federal Trade Commission guidelines requiring clear disclosure of sponsored content. McFarland was incarcerated at Otisville Federal Correctional Institution in New York, where he reportedly taught other inmates about social media marketing and entrepreneurship, displaying the same self-confidence and salesmanship that had enabled his frauds. In March 2020, McFarland filed a motion for early release due to COVID-19 concerns in prisons, claiming he had asthma that made him vulnerable, though the motion was denied by a judge who noted his criminal history and risk of continued fraud. He was subsequently transferred to home confinement in 2020 as part of broader Bureau of Prisons releases during the pandemic. In March 2023, McFarland was released from federal custody after serving approximately 4 years of his 6-year sentence, immediately returning to social media with a video promising a new venture, Fyre Festival 2, claiming he wanted to redeem himself by creating the event that the first festival should have been, an announcement that struck many observers as either darkly ironic or evidence that McFarland had learned nothing from his crimes. The announcement generated both ridicule and genuine interest, with some people apparently willing to trust McFarland again despite his proven fraud and incarceration, demonstrating either the power of his salesmanship or the short memory of internet culture. McFarland's story represents the intersection of influencer culture, fraudulent entrepreneurship, and the vulnerability of people seeking exclusive experiences and social media validation, with his crime exploiting the aspirational nature of social media and the willingness of people to trust curated images over substance. The Bahamian workers who were never paid for their labor in preparing for the festival remain among the most sympathetic victims, with one woman, Marion Rawl, who ran a restaurant and catering service, reporting she had spent $50,000 of her life savings paying her employees when McFarland failed to pay them, only recovering some of the money through a GoFundMe campaign organized by sympathetic people who learned of her situation through the documentaries. The Fyre Festival remains a definitive cautionary tale about influencer marketing, the disconnect between social media image and reality, and how fraudulent entrepreneurs can exploit the aspirational desires of social media users to commit large-scale fraud that leaves victims ranging from wealthy millennials seeking exclusive experiences to working-class Bahamians who provided labor and services that were never compensated. Number 5. Danielle Bregoli, Bad Baby. From Dr. Phil to rap fame to legal troubles, Danielle Bregoli became one of the most unlikely influencer success stories after appearing on the Dr. Phil show in 2016 at age 13, where her rebellious attitude and now iconic phrase, "Cash me outside, how about that," went instantly viral, transforming her from a troubled teen on a daytime talk show to a social media phenomenon, and eventually a controversial rap artist and influencer with millions of followers and substantial earnings. Born in 2003 in Boynton Beach, Florida, Bregoli appeared on Dr. Phil with her mother seeking help for behavioral issues including fighting, running away, and general defiance, but the segment became a viral sensation not for its intended purpose but because Bregoli's combative attitude and phrase became an instant meme, spreading across social media with remarkable speed and turning the teenager into an overnight celebrity. Rather than fading after her 15 minutes of fame, Bregoli, who adopted the stage name Bad Baby, leveraged her notoriety into a music career, signing a record deal with Atlantic Records in 2017 and releasing her first single, These Hoes, which actually charted on the Billboard Hot 100, making her the youngest female rapper to debut on the chart. Her subsequent music releases gained millions of streams, her social media following exploded to millions of followers across platforms, and she began earning substantial income through music, brand endorsements, merchandise, and eventually OnlyFans, where she reportedly earned over $50 million in her first years on the platform after joining when she turned 18. This financial success made her one of the most commercially successful influencers to emerge from viral fame, with reports suggesting she earned tens of millions of dollars while still a teenager, an almost unprecedented transformation from troubled teen on a daytime TV show to multimillionaire influencer and recording artist. However, Bregoli's success has been accompanied by consistent controversy and legal issues that have repeatedly put her influence and behavior in the spotlight. In 2017, she was arrested on charges including grand theft, marijuana possession, and filing a false police report after allegedly stealing her mother's car, with the case eventually being resolved through a plea deal that included probation. Her relationship with her mother Barbara became publicly contentious, with both making allegations against each other in interviews and social media posts, with Danielle accusing her mother of exploiting her for money and Barbara claiming Danielle was out of control and had been physically violent toward her. The family dysfunction played out publicly through social media and interviews, adding to the spectacle that surrounded Bregoli's public persona. In 2019, Bregoli was involved in a physical altercation on an airplane, with videos showing her in a confrontation with another passenger, though charges were not filed in that incident. She has been involved in numerous public feuds with other influencers and celebrities, some of which escalated to physical confrontations or threats of violence, with videos of these incidents regularly going viral and fueling her notoriety. Critics argued that Bregoli represented the worst aspects of influencer culture, where negative behavior, controversy, and conflict were rewarded with attention and financial success, creating perverse incentives for troubled young people to act out publicly for profit. In 2021, Bregoli made serious allegations about her time at Turnabout Ranch, a facility for troubled teens in Utah where she had been sent after her Dr. Phil appearance, claiming she and other teenagers were abused and mistreated at the facility, allegations that contributed to broader scrutiny of the troubled teen industry and led to Dr. Phil's show cutting ties with the ranch. The allegations painted a more complex picture of Bregoli as someone who had experienced genuine trauma and exploitation even as she simultaneously courted controversy and profited from her public persona. Her decision to join OnlyFans immediately upon turning 18 in 2021 generated enormous controversy and discussion about exploitation, with critics arguing that her audience included many people who had been following her since she was a minor, and that the transition to adult content was inappropriate and potentially exploitative, while defenders argued she had the right to monetize her image and body as an adult and was taking control of her own financial destiny. The reported $50 million earnings from the platform in her first months as a creator made headlines internationally and sparked debate about the economics of influencer culture and adult content creation. Throughout her rise to fame and wealth, questions have persisted about the adults in Bregoli's life and whether she was being properly supported and guided or exploited, with her managers, record label, and even her mother facing scrutiny about their roles in promoting a teenager whose brand was built on controversy and negative behavior. In 2022, Bregoli was involved in a legal dispute with her former management company, suing them and seeking to terminate her contract, claiming they had taken advantage of her when she was a minor and had mismanaged her career and finances. The lawsuit revealed the complex business arrangements surrounding her career and raised questions about how teenagers who achieve sudden fame are protected from financial exploitation. Legal documents in the case showed the substantial sums Bregoli had earned and the various entities that had contracts giving them percentages of her income, illustrating how her viral fame had been transformed into a complex business operation involving multiple parties with financial interests in maintaining and expanding her controversial brand. As of 2024, Bregoli continues to maintain a significant social media presence and music career, having transitioned from her initial viral fame into a more established, if controversial, influencer and artist with a dedicated fanbase. She has been arrested multiple times as an adult for various offenses including battery and theft, with charges typically being resolved through plea deals or being dropped. Her most recent arrest in 2023 involved charges of battery against her boyfriend, though she claimed the incident was a misunderstanding and the charges were later reduced. Critics continue to argue that Bregoli represents a troubling example of how social media and entertainment industries can elevate and profit from troubled young people without adequately considering their welfare, while supporters point to her business acumen and success in transforming brief viral fame into sustained career and financial success. The bad baby phenomenon raises uncomfortable questions about exploitation, agency, and how society views troubled teenage girls, with reasonable people disagreeing about whether Bregoli has been empowered or exploited by her fame, and whether the adults around her have acted in her best interests or their own financial interests. Her case also illustrates how the traditional boundaries between viral fame, music careers, influencer marketing, and adult content creation have dissolved in the social media age, with individual personalities building multimedia empires that span multiple platforms and revenue streams. Whether Bregoli's story is ultimately one of resilience and business success or a cautionary tale about the dangers of viral fame and inadequate protection of minors in the entertainment industry remains a matter of perspective and ongoing debate, with her continued legal issues suggesting that her transformation from troubled teen to wealthy influencer has not resolved the underlying behavioral and personal issues that first brought her to public attention. Number 4. Jake Paul, the YouTube star accused of looting during protests. Jake Paul built one of the most successful and controversial influencer careers of the modern YouTube era, accumulating over 20 million subscribers through prank videos, stunts, vlogs, and music, before transitioning into professional boxing where he has earned millions fighting both fellow YouTubers and professional boxers, but his career has been punctuated by numerous legal issues and controversies that have repeatedly brought him into conflict with law enforcement and communities. Born in 1997 in Cleveland, Ohio, Paul began his social media career on the now-defunct platform Vine before transitioning to YouTube, where his high-energy, often chaotic content appealed to young audiences. His early success led to a starring role on the Disney Channel series Bizaardvark, though Disney fired him in 2017 amid complaints from neighbors about his disruptive behavior at his West Hollywood rental home, where he and his group of collaborators, Team 10, were filming stunts that created noise, crowds, and disturbances that led to multiple complaints and news coverage. The incident established a pattern in Paul's career where his content creation frequently came into conflict with laws, community standards, and the rights of others. In 2017, Paul was sued by landlords of his Beverly Grove rental home for over $2.5 million, with the lawsuit alleging he had caused substantial property damage, violated numerous lease terms, and created dangerous conditions through his filming activities, claims that Paul disputed but that underscored the tension between influencer content creation and traditional property and community norms. Throughout 2018 and 2019, Paul faced various controversies including FTC investigations into his promotion of cryptocurrency projects and alleged involvement in pump-and-dump schemes where influencers promoted investments before selling their own holdings at inflated prices, accusations he denied while settling some claims. His mansion in Calabasas, California, became notorious for wild parties, dangerous stunts filmed for YouTube, and conflicts with neighbors who complained about noise, crowds, and the conversion of a residential neighborhood into essentially a content creation studio and party venue. In May 2020, during the widespread protests following the death of George Floyd, Paul was filmed at a mall in Scottsdale, Arizona, where looting and property destruction were occurring amid protests against police brutality. Video footage showed Paul inside the Fashion Square Mall while looting was taking place, with some videos appearing to show him and others present while stores were being broken into and property was taken. The footage generated immediate controversy, with critics accusing Paul of participating in or encouraging looting, exploiting a serious moment of civil unrest for content, and showing profound disrespect for the legitimate grievances being protested. Paul released a statement claiming he had been at the mall only to document the protests and had not participated in any looting or property destruction, stating he had been using his platform to document an important moment and that accusations he had looted were false and malicious. However, the Scottsdale Police Department announced they were investigating Paul's presence at the scene and considering charges, with police reviewing video footage and witness statements to determine what laws, if any, had been violated. In June 2020, Paul was charged with criminal trespass and unlawful assembly, misdemeanor charges related to his presence inside the mall during the looting, with prosecutors alleging he had knowingly entered and remained in the mall while criminal activity was occurring, and while the property owner had closed the premises due to the civil unrest. The charges carried potential jail time and fines, and significantly damaged Paul's public image at a time when the Black Lives Matter protests were a major cultural moment, and appearing to exploit that moment for content was seen as deeply offensive by many people. Paul maintained his innocence and characterized the charges as an overreaction and political prosecution designed to make an example of him due to his fame and platform. The case proceeded through the Scottsdale court system over subsequent months, with Paul's legal team arguing he was a journalist documenting newsworthy events and had First Amendment protections, while prosecutors argued he was not a credentialed journalist and had no legitimate purpose being inside closed private property during a riot situation. The legal wrangling continued into 2021, with various motions and continuances delaying resolution. Eventually, in March 2021, prosecutors dropped the charges against Jake Paul, with the Scottsdale City Attorney's Office stating that after reviewing all evidence and considering the circumstances, they had determined that proceeding with prosecution was not in the interest of justice. The decision not to prosecute disappointed critics who felt Paul had faced no real consequences for what they viewed as exploitation of serious civil unrest and possible participation in property crimes, while Paul's supporters saw it as vindication of his claim that he had been wrongly accused. The incident remained a permanent stain on Paul's reputation regardless of the legal outcome, with many people viewing the video evidence as clearly showing he had been present during looting and had shown poor judgment at minimum, even if he hadn't personally taken property. Beyond the mall incident, Paul has faced numerous other legal and ethical controversies throughout his influencer career. In July 2020, Paul hosted a massive party at his Calabasas mansion despite COVID-19 pandemic restrictions on gatherings, generating widespread criticism from public health officials and Calabasas Mayor Alicia Weintraub, who called the party extremely negligent and noted it violated county health orders designed to prevent disease spread. The party featured hundreds of unmasked attendees during a surge in California COVID cases, with Paul receiving significant backlash for apparently prioritizing content and partying over public health. In August 2020, FBI agents raided Paul's home as part of an ongoing investigation, executing a search warrant and seizing multiple firearms from the property, though the specific focus of the investigation was not immediately disclosed and no charges were filed at that time. The raid added to Paul's image problems and raised questions about what activities at his mansion had drawn federal law enforcement attention. Throughout his boxing career, which began in 2018 and has become his primary focus in recent years, Paul has continued to court controversy, including a December 2020 incident where he was charged with misdemeanor assault after an alleged altercation at a Scottsdale bar, charges he disputed and which were later dropped. His pattern of run-ins with law enforcement, community complaints, and controversial behavior has made him one of the most polarizing figures in influencer culture, with supporters praising his entrepreneurial success and entertaining content, while critics view him as a dangerous influence who faces few meaningful consequences for problematic behavior. Paul's transition to professional boxing, where he has fought and defeated several opponents including former MMA fighters and even some professional boxers, has been financially lucrative, with his fights generating millions in pay-per-view revenue, but has also generated criticism that his celebrity and promotional skills have allowed him to circumvent the traditional progression of boxing and take opportunities from fighters who have dedicated their lives to the sport. Paul has used his platform to advocate for boxer compensation and has positioned himself as a reformer challenging traditional boxing promotion, though critics argue this is merely opportunistic positioning from someone who has faced minimal consequences for repeatedly crossing legal and ethical lines. His younger years featured in a 2018 investigation by journalist Chris Hansen raised concerns about Paul's behavior toward young female fans and his creation of a Team 10 house environment where boundaries were unclear and young people were placed in potentially exploitative situations. Though Paul denied wrongdoing and no charges resulted from these concerns, the combination of immense wealth, enormous platform, devoted young fanbase, and pattern of legal controversies makes Jake Paul one of the most complicated and controversial figures in influencer culture, embodying both the financial opportunities and the ethical concerns that arise when individuals build massive audiences through entertainment that sometimes crosses legal and moral boundaries. His looting charges, regardless of their dismissal, became emblematic of broader concerns about influencers who appear to face few lasting consequences for behavior that would have serious ramifications for ordinary people, with the incident remaining one of the most cited examples of influencer misconduct even years later and even after legal charges were dropped, demonstrating that court outcomes don't necessarily determine lasting reputational impacts or broader cultural judgments about behavior and accountability. Number 3. Tiffany Mitchell. The mommy blogger arrested for child abuse. Tiffany Mitchell built a substantial following as a lifestyle and mommy blogger presenting an image of natural parenting, homesteading, and wholesome family life, but was arrested on serious child abuse charges that revealed a shocking disconnect between her carefully curated online persona and the reality of how she treated children in her care. Mitchell, who operated under the username Texas Girly Mama on Instagram and maintained blogs and other social media accounts, portrayed herself as a devoted mother practicing attachment parenting, homeschooling, and raising her children in a rural Texas setting with an emphasis on organic food, natural living, and traditional values. Her content included picturesque photos of her children in prairie dresses playing in fields, detailed posts about her homesteading activities, and discussions of her parenting philosophy that emphasized strict discipline and parental authority, combined with what she described as natural and loving child-rearing practices. Her following grew into the tens of thousands, with many mothers looking to her content for inspiration and advice on homeschooling, natural parenting, and managing large families. However, in June 2018, Mitchell was arrested in Cherokee County, Texas, on charges of causing serious bodily injury to a child, a second-degree felony that carries significant prison time. The arrest followed a months-long investigation by Child Protective Services and law enforcement after reports surfaced about the treatment of children in Mitchell's home. The investigation revealed disturbing allegations that Mitchell had physically abused multiple children in her care, with evidence including serious injuries to a child that investigators determined were not accidental. According to court documents and testimony, the abuse included severe physical punishment that went far beyond lawful parental discipline, with children suffering injuries that required medical attention. Investigators who examined the case found evidence that Mitchell's online persona of loving natural mother was dramatically at odds with how she actually treated the children in her home, with neighbors, medical professionals, and eventually the children themselves providing accounts of harsh physical punishment, deprivation, and treatment that investigators categorized as abuse rather than discipline. The specific details of the abuse documented in court filings were disturbing, including allegations that children were beaten with objects, deprived of food as punishment, isolated for extended periods, and subjected to physical force that caused significant injuries. Medical examinations of children removed from the home revealed evidence of both recent and older injuries consistent with ongoing physical abuse. Mitchell's husband was also investigated and faced questions about his knowledge of and participation in the abuse, with the investigation examining whether he had failed to protect the children even if he had not directly inflicted injuries. The case attracted significant attention in both local Texas media and among the parenting and mommy blogger communities online, with many of Mitchell's former followers expressing shock and betrayal upon learning that the family life she had portrayed online was allegedly a facade hiding serious abuse. The disconnect between her Instagram images of children playing happily in nature and the reality of what was allegedly happening behind closed doors became a focal point of discussions about the curated nature of social media and how influencers can present completely fabricated versions of their lives to followers. In legal proceedings, Mitchell faced second-degree felony charges that carried a potential sentence of 2 to 20 years in prison if convicted, with prosecutors presenting evidence including medical records, photographs of injuries, testimony from investigating officers, and eventually testimony from the children themselves about their treatment in the home. Her defense attorneys argued that Mitchell had not intended to cause serious injury, that the discipline had been within her parental rights, and that the children's injuries were less severe than prosecutors claimed, arguments that investigators and medical experts contradicted with evidence of the nature and extent of the documented injuries. The case proceeded through the Texas court system over 18 months, with Mitchell remaining free on bond while awaiting trial. In December 2019, before the case went to trial, Mitchell accepted a plea deal with prosecutors in which she pleaded guilty to a reduced charge of abandoning or endangering a child, a state jail felony. Under the terms of the plea agreement, Mitchell was sentenced to 18 months in state jail, which she could potentially serve as probation with time served, and faced requirements including parenting classes, anger management, and restrictions on contact with minor children. The plea deal was controversial, with some victims' advocates and community members believing the sentence was too lenient given the severity of the documented abuse, while the district attorney's office defended it as appropriate given evidentiary concerns and the willingness of the deal to secure a conviction without subjecting child victims to the trauma of testifying at trial. Mitchell's social media accounts were deleted or made private following her arrest, with her Instagram account Texas Girly Mama eventually disappearing entirely along with her blog posts that had documented her parenting philosophy and family life. The case became a frequently cited example in discussions about the dangers of performative parenting on social media, where the pressure to present a perfect family image and maintain a following can lead parents to prioritize content creation and image management over the actual welfare of their children. Child welfare experts pointed to the Mitchell case as illustrating how social media can enable and even reward child abuse when parents become more focused on documenting an idealized version of family life than on actually providing safe, nurturing care for children. The fact that Mitchell had built a following by presenting herself as an expert on natural, loving parenting while allegedly abusing children made the betrayal particularly acute for her followers, many of whom had looked to her for advice and inspiration in their own parenting journeys. Some former followers reported feeling guilt about having praised Mitchell's parenting or having recommended her content to other mothers, not realizing that they had been promoting someone who was allegedly harming children. The children removed from Mitchell's home were placed in protective custody and eventually into foster care or with relatives, with the court system working to ensure their safety and begin addressing the trauma they had experienced. Child psychologists involved in the case noted that children who experience abuse from parents who simultaneously present themselves publicly as loving caregivers face particular psychological challenges in understanding their experiences and reality. Following her release from incarceration, Mitchell faced significant restrictions on her access to children and requirements for ongoing supervision and treatment, with the goal of preventing future abuse while allowing for the possibility of rehabilitation. Her case remains sealed from public view in many respects to protect the identities and privacy of the child victims, though enough details emerged through court proceedings and media coverage to make the general facts public. The Tiffany Mitchell case stands as a warning about the potential for social media influence to mask serious dysfunction and abuse, with the carefully selected photos and curated content that builds a following sometimes bearing no resemblance to the reality of the influencer's actual life and behavior. Child Protective Services workers have pointed to the case in training as an example of how online presence should not be taken as evidence of actual parenting practices and how signs of abuse can exist alongside a public image of ideal parenting. The mommy blogger community experienced a period of reflection and discussion following Mitchell's arrest about the ethics of displaying children online, the pressure to present perfect family images, and how to balance content creation with children's welfare and privacy. Some influencers modified their content practices or reduced their children's presence in their content in response to the concerns raised by the Mitchell case and similar incidents. The case also highlighted challenges in investigating potential child abuse when families appear outwardly successful and when parents have public platforms that can complicate law enforcement's ability to investigate without alerting subjects. Mitchell's legacy in influencer culture is as a cautionary tale about the potential for social media performance to diverge completely from reality and the particular dangers when that performance involves children who cannot consent to being portrayed online and may be suffering abuse while being displayed as happy and well cared for in curated content designed to build their parents' influence and following. Number 2. Ruby Franke. The family vlogger sentenced for child abuse. Ruby Franke created one of the most popular family vlogging channels on YouTube, 8 Passengers, documenting her life with her husband Kevin and their 6 children, while presenting a strict parenting philosophy that emphasized discipline, consequences, and what she described as teaching children accountability and responsibility. But her channel ended in criminal conviction for horrific child abuse that shocked viewers and led to a prison sentence. The 8 Passengers channel, launched in 2015, grew rapidly as viewers were drawn to Franke's content showing daily life in her large family, homeschooling activities, and parenting decisions, with the channel eventually reaching over 2 million subscribers and generating substantial income through advertising revenue and sponsorships. Franke positioned herself as an authority on parenting, particularly on the importance of strict discipline and allowing children to experience natural consequences of their behavior, perspectives that generated both devoted followers who admired her firm approach and critics who felt some of her parenting choices crossed into territory that was harmful to children. Controversial moments documented on the channel included withholding meals from children as punishment, refusing to bring lunch to school for a child who forgot it as a lesson in responsibility, threatening to take away bedrooms, and other discipline tactics that generated significant online debate about where the line exists between firm parenting and harmful treatment. Despite these controversies, the channel remained popular and Franke expanded her influence, partnering with a life coach named Jody Hildebrandt who operated a counseling service called Connections, which promoted a philosophy of extreme personal accountability and addressing what Hildebrandt termed distortions in thinking and behavior. Franke became increasingly involved with Connections, bringing her children to sessions with Hildebrandt and eventually making the counseling philosophy central to her parenting approach. In 2022, Franke and her husband Kevin separated, with Ruby and several of the children moving to Hildebrandt's home in Ivins, Utah, where the living situation became increasingly isolated and concerning. The 8 Passengers channel stopped posting in early 2022, with Franke shifting her content to appearances on Hildebrandt's Connections YouTube channel, where the 2 women discussed their philosophy of accountability and addressed viewer questions. Content that struck many observers as increasingly extreme in its views on child discipline and personal responsibility. Behind the scenes, according to later investigations and court documents, the situation in Hildebrandt's home had become abusive, with Ruby Franke's children subjected to severe physical punishment, malnourishment, and psychological abuse justified through the distorted lens of the Connections philosophy that children needed extreme consequences to correct their distorted thinking. On August 30, 2023, the situation reached a crisis when Franke's 12-year-old son escaped from Hildebrandt's home and ran to a neighbor's house asking for food and water. The neighbor was alarmed by the child's emaciated appearance, visible wounds including what appeared to be rope burns around his ankles and wrists, and his desperate state, immediately calling 911. When police responded, they found the boy severely malnourished and wounded, and subsequently located Franke's 10-year-old daughter in the home in similar condition, also showing signs of severe malnourishment and physical abuse. Both children were immediately taken into protective custody and transported to a hospital for treatment of their injuries and malnutrition. Ruby Franke and Jody Hildebrandt were arrested at the scene and charged with multiple counts of aggravated child abuse, serious felonies carrying substantial prison time. The investigation revealed shocking details about the treatment the children had endured, with evidence that they had been bound with ropes, denied adequate food and water, given severe physical punishment, subjected to psychological manipulation and abuse, and essentially tortured under the guise of helping them overcome their supposed distortions and teach them accountability. Medical professionals who examined the children documented extensive injuries, severe malnutrition, wounds in various stages of healing suggesting ongoing abuse over an extended period, and psychological trauma from their treatment. The children reported having been told that their abuse was necessary for their own good, that they were evil or possessed by demons that needed to be driven out, and that the severe treatment was an act of love designed to save them, reflecting the twisted philosophy that Franke and Hildebrandt had been promoting through their counseling work. 4 of the 6 Franke children had been in the home, with the 2 youngest having been subjected to the most severe abuse, while the older children had been removed from the situation or had left home before the worst of the abuse occurred. Kevin Franke, Ruby's estranged husband, cooperated with investigators and stated he had been kept away from his children and had not known the full extent of what was happening at Hildebrandt's home, though questions remained about how much he should have known given warning signs and the deteriorating situation. The arrest of Ruby Franke shocked the YouTube community and the many followers who had watched 8 Passengers for years, with people grappling with the horrifying reality that a channel that had documented family life for millions of viewers had hidden such severe abuse. Many former viewers reported feeling guilt about having watched and even supported the channel through ad views, with the realization that children who had been displayed as part of wholesome family content were actually being severely abused, creating profound discomfort about the ethics of family vlogging more broadly. Child welfare advocates pointed to the case as an example of how family vlogging channels can enable abuse by providing a public facade of normal or even exemplary family life while children suffer behind the scenes. In February 2024, both Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt pleaded guilty to 4 counts of second-degree felony aggravated child abuse as part of plea agreements with prosecutors. In their plea allocutions, both women admitted to physically torturing the children, denying them adequate food and water, inflicting serious physical injury, and creating an environment of extreme fear through physical and psychological abuse. Ruby Franke's statement to the court included acknowledgement that her actions had been criminal and harmful, though her framing suggested she still viewed herself as having had good intentions that had been corrupted or taken to extremes. In February 2024, Judge John Walton sentenced both Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt to 4 consecutive prison sentences of 1 to 15 years on each count, which under Utah law meant they would each serve 1 to 15 years on each of 4 counts, with the sentences to be served consecutively, potentially resulting in a sentence of 4 to 60 years before parole eligibility, though the Utah Board of Pardons would ultimately determine how much time they would actually serve within those parameters. Judge Walton's sentencing statement was direct, noting that the abuse had been severe, prolonged, and had caused serious physical and psychological harm to children who had been defenseless against the adults who should have protected them. The severity of the sentences reflected both the nature of the abuse and the betrayal of parental and professional responsibility by a mother and a licensed counselor who had positioned themselves as authorities on proper child rearing. Franke's children were placed in the custody of Child Protective Services and eventually with family members as the court worked to ensure their safety and begin their long process of healing from severe trauma and abuse. Kevin Franke filed for divorce and has worked to maintain relationships with his children while addressing the complicated dynamics created by years of increasingly extreme parenting influenced by Hildebrandt's philosophy. The 8 Passengers YouTube channel was deleted following the arrests, erasing years of content that had documented the family's life, though archived videos and commentary about the channel remained widely available as people analyzed the content for signs of abuse and warning signals that had been visible in retrospect. The case prompted broader discussion about family vlogging and whether children should be able to consent to appearing in monetized content, with some jurisdictions considering legislation to regulate family vlogging similarly to child acting, requiring financial protections for children whose images generate revenue and limiting their hours of participation. Jodi Hildebrandt's counseling license was suspended following her arrest, and investigations into her connections practice revealed a pattern of extreme tactics and philosophies that multiple former clients described as psychologically harmful, with the state of Utah reviewing whether she should have been allowed to practice given her methods. The Connections YouTube channel was deleted and the organization effectively dissolved in the wake of the criminal charges. Ruby Franke's case stands as perhaps the most extreme example of family vlogging gone horribly wrong, demonstrating how the performance of family life for an audience can evolve into something that enables and even encourages abusive behavior as parents become more concerned with maintaining their content and philosophy than with actually caring for their children's welfare. The fact that the abuse occurred alongside and was justified by a philosophy of accountability and discipline that Franke had been publicly promoting made the betrayal particularly acute for followers who had trusted her parenting advice. Child psychologists involved in treating the Franke children have spoken publicly about the particular harm caused when abuse is framed to children as being for their own good, and when children are displayed publicly as happy and well-adjusted while secretly suffering severe mistreatment. The Ruby Franke case has become the definitive cautionary tale about family vlogging and influencer parenting, cited in discussions about children's rights, social media ethics, and the need for greater protections for children who appear in monetized content created by their parents. Some YouTube families have modified or ended their channels in response to the concerns raised by the Franke case, while others have defended family vlogging as benign documentation of family life, leading to ongoing debate about where appropriate boundaries exist when children are the content that builds their parents' influence and income. Ruby Franke will spend years in prison for the torture and abuse of her own children, abuse that occurred while she had been presenting herself as a parenting authority, and her name has become synonymous with the dangers of unchecked parental authority and the dark potential of social media influence when applied to parenting and child-rearing. Number 1. Antonio Brown. The NFL star turned troubled influencer Antonio Brown's fall from elite professional athlete to controversial social media figure embroiled in multiple criminal allegations represents one of the most dramatic declines in modern sports and influencer culture. With a former Super Bowl champion and one of the NFL's most talented wide receivers now facing serious legal consequences and widespread condemnation for his behavior. Born in 1988 in Miami, Florida, Brown overcame a difficult childhood marked by poverty and his parents' troubled relationship to become an exceptional football player, earning a scholarship to Central Michigan University and eventually being drafted by the Pittsburgh Steelers in the 6th round of the 2010 NFL Draft. Over the next decade, Brown established himself as arguably the best wide receiver in professional football, earning 7 Pro Bowl selections, for first-team All-Pro honors, and becoming one of the most productive receivers in NFL history with over 11,000 receiving yards and 75 touchdowns during his career. His success on the field was accompanied by lucrative contracts, endorsement deals, and a growing social media presence where he cultivated an image of confidence, success, and controversial showmanship. However, beginning around 2017 and accelerating dramatically in 2019, Brown's behavior became increasingly erratic and concerning, with a series of incidents that would destroy his football career and lead to multiple criminal investigations and charges. In January 2019, Brown engaged in a highly publicized feud with the Pittsburgh Steelers organization, leading to his trade to the Oakland Raiders. But his time with the Raiders lasted only through training camp, as his bizarre behavior, including threatening to retire over a dispute about his helmet, getting into a confrontation with the team's general manager, and posting private communications on social media, led to his release before playing a single regular season game. The New England Patriots signed Brown in September 2019, but released him after just 11 days and 1 game when a civil lawsuit was filed by his former trainer Brittany Taylor alleging that Brown had sexually assaulted her on multiple occasions, including rape, during training sessions in 2017 and 2018. The lawsuit included detailed allegations of 3 separate sexual assaults, with Taylor claiming Brown had forced himself on her despite her repeated rejections and that his behavior had become increasingly aggressive and inappropriate over time. Brown denied the allegations and claimed the encounters were consensual, but the Patriots released him amid the controversy. Additional allegations emerged shortly after when an artist named Ashley Saunders, who had been painting a mural in Brown's home, accused him of inappropriate sexual behavior, including appearing naked in front of her and making her uncomfortable with his comments and actions. The NFL launched an investigation into both sets of allegations, placing Brown on the commissioner's exempt list, which prevented him from playing while the investigation continued. Brown's response to these crises was to increasingly rely on social media as his primary platform, posting erratic content, sharing private text messages, making accusations against his accusers and former teams, and displaying behavior that concerned mental health professionals and observers who worried he was experiencing a psychological breakdown. Throughout 2020, Brown continued posting controversial content, got into public feuds with former teammates and media members, and maintained his innocence regarding all allegations against him. In early 2021, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers signed Brown after his suspension from the NFL was reduced following the investigation, with quarterback Tom Brady reportedly advocating for giving Brown another chance. Brown played for the Buccaneers during their 2020 Super Bowl championship season and returned for the 2021 season, but his tenure ended dramatically in January 2022 when, during a game against the New York Jets, Brown removed his equipment and left the field shirtless while the game was in progress, jogging off and waving to fans in a bizarre mid-game exit that effectively ended his NFL career. The incident, which went viral across social media, was later explained by Brown as a protest against the team forcing him to play while injured, though the Buccaneers and head coach Bruce Arians stated Brown had been cut because of his actions during the game. Following his final exit from the NFL, Brown's legal troubles escalated significantly. In November 2021, a Florida swimming pool company filed a lawsuit against Brown alleging he had refused to pay over $80,000 for work completed on his home and had thrown rocks at delivery truck drivers who came to his property. In April 2022, Brown was arrested on a domestic battery charge after an incident at his Tampa home involving the mother of his children, with a police report alleging he had thrown a shoe at her during an argument, hitting her, and engaged in behavior that constituted domestic violence under Florida law. Brown was charged with a felony, released on bail, and ordered to stay away from the alleged victim. In December 2022, Brown was involved in another incident at his Tampa home when police were called regarding a dispute with the same woman, with reports alleging he had locked her out of the house while their children were inside, leading to additional charges including burglary with assault. The December 2022 incident resulted in multiple felony charges against Brown, with prosecutors alleging he had intentionally locked the woman out of the home, throwing her belongings outside, and had committed battery by throwing items at her. In May 2023, Brown accepted a plea deal to resolve the charges, pleading no contest to reduce charges that allowed him to avoid a trial and potential prison time, with his sentence including probation, anger management classes, a psychological evaluation, and restrictions on firearm possession. The plea deal was controversial, with domestic violence advocates arguing Brown had been given lenient treatment despite multiple allegations and incidents, while Brown's attorneys characterized it as appropriate resolution that recognized mitigating circumstances and allowed him to focus on rehabilitation. Throughout his legal troubles, Brown has maintained an active and controversial social media presence, posting content that ranges from promotional material for his music career, lifestyle brand, and various business ventures to bizarre rants, sexually explicit material, conspiracy theories, and attacks on critics and media figures. His Twitter account, which has over 2 million followers, has been suspended and reinstated multiple times due to violations of platform policies. In May 2023, Brown faced new legal trouble when he was arrested on a suspended license charge after being pulled over in Tampa, a relatively minor offense that nonetheless added to his extensive record of legal issues. The pattern of Brown's legal troubles, erratic behavior, and controversial social media presence has led mental health professionals and sports commentators to express concern about his well-being, with some suggesting he may be experiencing untreated mental health issues or the effects of chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE, from repeated head injuries during his football career. Though Brown has not publicly acknowledged mental health challenges and has rejected suggestions that his behavior reflects anything other than his authentic personality and justified responses to perceived slights and injustices. His transformation from elite athlete to troubled influencer has been accompanied by increasingly controversial positions and associations, including promoting conspiracy theories, making anti-Semitic comments that drew widespread condemnation, and aligning himself with controversial political and social movements that have further damaged his reputation and marketability. Former teammates, coaches, and sports commentators have expressed sadness at Brown's trajectory, with many people who worked with him during his successful years noting that his talent was undeniable, but that his behavior has overshadowed his accomplishments and led to a tragic waste of his abilities and opportunities. Financial issues have also emerged, with Brown facing multiple lawsuits related to unpaid debts, contracts, and damages from various incidents, suggesting that despite earning over $70 million during his NFL career, his financial situation may be precarious due to legal fees, settlements, and questionable business decisions. His music career, which he has promoted extensively on social media, has generated limited commercial success despite his fame, with his attempts to establish himself as a serious artist meeting skepticism from critics and audiences who view it as another example of his erratic pivot from one pursuit to another without sustained commitment or focus. Brown's case represents a particularly complex intersection of athletic achievement, mental health concerns, criminal behavior, and social media influence, with reasonable observers disagreeing about how much responsibility he bears for his actions versus how much his behavior may reflect neurological damage from football or untreated mental illness. His victims, particularly the women who have accused him of sexual assault and domestic violence, have received threats and harassment from Brown's supporters, illustrating how celebrity and social media followings can be weaponized against accusers even when serious allegations are supported by evidence and testimony. The NFL and sports media have largely moved on from Brown, treating him as a cautionary tale rather than a potential redemption story, with little expectation he will return to professional football given his age, years away from the sport, and extensive behavioral and legal issues. Child welfare authorities have been involved with Brown's family due to the domestic incidents and concerns about the environment his children are exposed to. Though specific details of custody arrangements are not public, Brown's social media content continues to generate engagement and attention, demonstrating how controversy and erratic behavior can maintain relevance and following even when separated from legitimate professional achievement, with his posts regularly going viral and being discussed by sports media despite his having no current affiliation with the NFL. The Antonio Brown story remains unfinished as he continues to navigate legal issues, attempt various business ventures, and maintain his controversial social media presence. But his legacy has already been written as that of an immensely talented athlete whose behavior and legal troubles transformed him from celebrated champion to cautionary tale about the fragility of success, the importance of accountability, and the complex factors that can contribute to a dramatic fall from grace. His case has prompted important discussions about how sports organizations handle players exhibiting concerning behavior, how legal systems address domestic violence and sexual assault allegations involving celebrities, and how social media platforms should moderate content from controversial figures who use their platforms to attack accusers and spread potentially harmful messages to large audiences. Whether Brown will ultimately face more severe legal consequences, receive effective help for whatever mental health or neurological issues may be affecting him, or continue his downward spiral remains uncertain, but his transformation from NFL superstar to troubled influencer with multiple criminal charges and allegations stands as one of the most dramatic and disturbing falls from grace in modern sports and social media culture.